What's up guys? Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Kackie and welcome to video number 11, the second to last video in my 12 Days of Mindfulness series. So today we are going to be bringing it all full circle and we are going to be talking about a concept that I like to call creating your own universe. And that sounds crazy. It sounds like, oh okay, it's time to live in our own heads, which is actually the total opposite of what I intended for this series. The series was supposed to be a way to take a lot of these very abstract strategies and concepts of mindfulness and bring them down to earth in a very practical way. And this will actually be no different. This is a really good, I think it's good. It works for me. It's a great metaphor for how to bring all of the things that we talked about in this series. So your mindfulness practice, your self-forgiveness, transmuting negative energy and things like that, and bring them to your everyday life in a way that kind of fits inside your head, if that makes sense. So the reason I call it creating your own universe is because I particularly have an issue, a challenge with letting negativity into my life. Not necessarily just people, but also myself. And I find that that is probably the biggest challenge that I have to overcome in my life, is that I tend to exaggerate the negative, and I don't think that I'm the only one who does that. I tend to take criticism, especially from myself, really hard, and I tend to say things to myself that I would never let anyone say to me, or that I would ever say to anyone else. I am my most cruel critic, and I also tend to focus on the negative interactions that I have with other people and sort of build a case in my own head that that person hates me. And that is incredibly unhealthy, also super unrealistic. And when I say that these are the things that I do, that is when I'm at my least healthy mental fitness level. I think that we all have personality tendencies that either only come out when we're at our best and some that only come out when we're at our worst. And the ones that come out when we're at our worst tend to be the ones that send us snowballing and spiraling downwards in a way that it starts to expose all of the really horrible ways that we can treat ourselves. And so the whole idea of creating your own universe is trying to pump the brakes on that and have a place that you can retreat to that is perfect, right? There's no such thing as perfect, but this beautiful place that you can kind of construct for yourself is allowed to be perfect. And the reason that you want it to be perfect is because it represents your ideal self. Okay, so it's essentially a place that you kind of, I imagine it to be a place that you sort of surround yourself with, almost like your aura, except bigger, right? And so it's not necessarily inside your head as much as it is something that you kind of carry around with you all day long, and it's, I think, just sort of a protective sphere. And when you're within that protective when you're within that protective sphere, which, you know, ideally would be all the time, but, you know, we do have to just kind of interact with the world, then you are at your best. When you're in it, you essentially get to make the rules, right? So you don't let in negative stuff. You don't have the negative self-talk. It's where I go when I don't want to be the person this close to the mirror, mashing every single pore on my face out of some sort of strange self-hatred. And it's the place where I can kind of retreat to when I'm really thinking negative things about myself, or I'm letting someone really get to me. And like I said, you make the rules. So like, some people aren't allowed in your universe. They just kind of disappear when they walk through it, like, sorry, you don't get to live in my universe. So that's the whole idea, is it's kind of this beautiful, perfect, protective place where you can retreat to remind yourself that things are going to be okay. And a lot of the writings and teachings on meditation have to do with understanding that there is this voice in your head that is going to always find something to fixate on. And the idea is to divorce yourself from it and understand it for what it is, identify it, say, yeah, I know you're going to just keep running your mouth and saying negative crap and critiquing me all the time, but like, I exist outside of that, and like, I don't have to listen to it. And that to me applies itself better from an everyday practical standpoint when I think of it as I get to create my own universe. I get to go to a place where that chatter is separate from me, and where the kind of negative crap that I'm constantly saying to myself doesn't really have a voice. It doesn't really have a place. And I maintain that space and sort of, like I said, you know, create it, make my own rules essentially through my daily practice. And essentially what I'm doing when I'm doing my yoga, or when I'm journaling, or when I'm being, exercising gratitude, or using manifestation or anything like that, I am then displacing the negative things that are kind of keeping me from staying in that really positive place. And I notice a lot that if I fall down on my practice, and if I don't invest that time in myself, and I'm not really present in it, I will kind of start to lose sight of that really fantastic feeling, and I'll kind of be like, well, was it really that great to begin with? And you just kind of like start to lose touch with that part of yourself and the importance of it, and then you find yourself kind of depressed and anxious and back where you started, root chakra, and you don't really remember like what all of the great things were, and then you can kind of come back to this place that you've made for yourself. And it's essentially this like psychological paradise where you remember like how clear everything can be when you just shut that stupid voice off in your head and you tell it that it doesn't have control over you, and that the way that you can combat that is by investing more and more into the positive part of your brain, the self, the one that has this really great peaceful energy. And it's when we're there, when we can retreat to that place, and when we have sort of like our own mental sanctuary, that's where we go when we meditate. That's where we go when we need to start addressing some of the bad things that sort of bubble up in ourselves in order to sort of like address them and solve for them and things like that. Once we've kind of reached that like, third eye chakra kind of space, that's where we can go to when we need to talk frankly to ourselves about like the really extra bonus things that we get to give to ourselves. And so yeah, that's where you always are when you're at your highest meditative state, but at the same time, you can take it with you every day too. And I think that the beauty of it for me has been this idea that when I am more present in that space, I don't feel the need to overcompensate in a lot of the ways that my personality kind of like wants me to. We talked about in another video how like I have the tendency to want people to perceive me in a certain way, and if I feel like I'm being misperceived, I tend to overcompensate and just become very obnoxious, and I tend to pretty much make sure that I'm being perceived in a really negative way, and then I shame myself for it afterwards and things like that. But if I can be in this really positive kind of like my personal sanctuary universe, I find that I can apply mindfulness to a situation and get ahead of it before I create a situation that I'm going to shame myself for later. And that applies to just about anything that you find challenging. If you think that it's hard going to a party without drinking too much, or it's hard doing social interaction without being really over the top, or it's hard just going to school because people bully you and you tend to kind of like, have a really like nasty opinion of yourself because you let people get to you and stuff like that, like all of these are kind of anecdotal. Whatever the issue is, it is to me incredibly important to have a place that's yours in your own mind that you can return to when you need to feel safe and you need to remember how beautiful and pure you can be, and how incredible this immovable force at the center of your being actually is when you can, for even just a moment, shut off all of the chatter of that kind of negative voice in your head. So that's probably the most abstract one so far, guys, but I think that that is sort of like just if I could draw a mental picture of how I keep all of the things that we've talked about in this series so far with me every day. And yes, it makes me sound crazy, but you are totally allowed to borrow my crazy, or you can make up some crazy of your own. And I encourage you to. So if there are any other kind of like metaphors that help you sort of stay mindful throughout the day and, make it so that you can apply these things from a day-to-day practical standpoint, let me know. And if you guys like this, give it a thumbs up. I hope you guys are enjoying this series, and if you want to keep hanging out with me in the future, go ahead and hit the button down below and subscribe to my channel. And guys, we are so close to Christmas. If you celebrate Christmas, I hope you are going to have a Merry Christmas. If you celebrate other things, I hope that those are awesome too. And I will see you